The crimson dust of Kepler 442b swirled around Captain Sarah Chen's boots as she knelt beside the twisted wreckage of what had once been humanity's most advanced research station. 3 months had passed since the Zephyrian assault fleet had reduced New Geneva to smoking ruins, and the galactic community had written off any survivors. They were wrong. Sarah's fingers traced the scorched metal framework that had once housed the xenobiology lab where her sister Emma had worked. The alien invaders had been thorough in their destruction, melting entire sections with plasma cannons and reducing centuries of human scientific achievement to slag. Yet something glinted beneath a collapsed support beam, catching the pale light of the system's twin suns. "Captain, we should move," whispered Sergeant Torres, his rifle trained on the horizon where purple storm clouds gathered. "The Zephyrian patrols sweep this sector every 6 hours." Sarah ignored him, her hands working frantically to clear debris from the metallic gleam. Her squad of 12 battle-hardened Marines had followed her across 3 star systems for this moment. They'd hijacked a Zephyrian transport, fought through 2 blockades, and lost 3 good soldiers just to reach this graveyard planet. The galactic press called it a fool's errand. The Earth Military Command had branded her a deserter. But Sarah knew her sister was alive somewhere in this wasteland. The object came free with a metallic screech that echoed across the desolate landscape. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she held up a simple pink hairbrush, its bristles caked with dust, but miraculously intact. Emma's hairbrush, the same one their grandmother had given her before they'd shipped out to the colonies 15 years ago. "Sir." Torres stepped closer, his weathered face creasing with concern. "It's just a brush." Sarah's grip tightened around the handle. Just a brush. These aliens, these self-proclaimed superior beings who had conquered half the galaxy, couldn't understand the significance of such a simple object. The Zephyrians viewed humans as primitive, emotional creatures unworthy of their advanced civilization. They'd invaded human space not for resources or territory, but to prove their superiority by crushing what they saw as an inferior species. But they made one critical error. They'd underestimated what humans would do for family. The hairbrush was more than plastic and bristles. It was proof that Emma had been here recently, proof that she'd survived the initial attack. Sarah closed her eyes and remembered her sister's habit of brushing her long black hair exactly 100 times before bed, a ritual that had driven Sarah crazy during their shared quarters on the transport ship to Kepler 442b. "She's alive," Sarah whispered, her voice carrying across the ruined landscape like a promise. Lieutenant Morrison, the squad's demolitions expert, approached carefully. "Captain, even if your sister survived the initial bombardment, it's been 3 months. The Zephyrians have occupation forces across 7 continents." Sarah stood, tucking the hairbrush into her tactical vest next to her heart. "Then we find their occupation forces." The transformation in her demeanor was instant and terrifying. The desperate sister searching through rubble vanished, replaced by the decorated Marine captain who'd earned her reputation in the brutal campaigns against the Hectoran Collective. Her squad had seen her in action during the siege of New Babylon, where she'd held off an entire enemy regiment with nothing but a damaged mech suit and pure human stubbornness. "Torres, what's our intelligence on Zephyrian prisoner facilities?" The sergeant consulted his tactical display. 3 confirmed installations on this continent. The closest is a processing center 50 clicks north, built into the old mining complex at Devil's Canyon. Intelligence suggests they're using human captives for forced labor. Sarah nodded, her mind already calculating vectors and timelines. "Morrison, what's our explosive inventory?" "For plasma charges, 6 quantum grenades, and enough conventional explosives to level a city block." He grinned, revealing teeth stained with stimulant residue. "Plus whatever we can scavenge from Zephyrian equipment." "Kowalski, communications status?" The young communications specialist looked up from his equipment. "Still jammed, Captain. The Zephyrians have orbital scramblers blocking all frequencies." We're flying blind until we can reach the resistance cells in the eastern mountains. Sarah surveyed her team. 12 Marines against an entire occupation force. The smart play would be to retreat, regroup with Earth Command, and return with a proper invasion fleet. But Emma was here now, and Sarah had learned during the War of the Burning Skies that smart plays didn't always save the people you loved. The Zephyrian War had ended badly for humanity. 3 core worlds glassed from orbit, the colonial fleet scattered, and Earth itself under constant threat of annihilation. The ceasefire hadn't been a victory, but a desperate attempt to buy time while humanity rebuilt its shattered military. Most humans accepted their new status as a minor species in galactic politics. Sarah Chun was not most humans. She keyed her comm unit to the squad frequency. Listen up, Marines. We came here for one reason: to prove that no force in this galaxy can break the human spirit. The Zephyrians think they're superior because they have bigger ships and better weapons. They're about to learn what happens when you threaten a human family. The wind picked up, carrying the acrid scent of melted polymer and twisted metal across the ruins. In the distance, the distinctive whine of Zephyrian atmospheric craft grew louder. The patrol was returning early. Into the tunnels, Sarah commanded, leading her squad toward the maintenance shafts that honeycombed the research station's foundation. We'll move underground until we reach the perimeter. As they descended into the artificial caverns, Sarah felt the hairbrush pressing against her chest like a talisman. Emma was alive. Emma was waiting. And Sarah would burn down every Zephyrian installation on this planet to bring her sister home. The tunnel system was a maze of service corridors and maintenance shafts designed to support the massive research complex. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, powered by backup fusion cells that had somehow survived the bombardment. The air tasted of ozone and fear, but it was breathable. 20 minutes into their underground march, Kowalski held up a hand for silence. Footsteps echoed from a parallel tunnel, too heavy and rhythmic to be human. Zephyrian patrol. Sarah gestured for her squad to take positions along the corridor walls. Through a ventilation grate, she could see the distinctive blue-gray uniforms of Zephyrian occupation troops. 6 soldiers, armed with energy rifles and wearing full environmental suits. They moved with the casual confidence of conquerors who had never faced serious resistance. They were about to learn differently. Sarah's hand moved to the combat knife strapped to her thigh. The same knife she'd used to carve her name into the hull of the Hectoran dreadnought after single-handedly destroying its bridge crew. The Zephyrians had studied human military tactics, but they'd made the mistake of focusing on large-scale engagements. They didn't understand guerrilla warfare. They didn't understand what motivated a human soldier fighting for something more important than politics or territory. The patrol passed beneath their position, completely unaware of the 12 predators watching from above. Sarah felt her squad's tension like a coiled spring, ready to unleash violence at her command. But not yet. They needed to reach the surface before engaging the enemy. As the Zephyrian footsteps faded into the distance, Sarah led her team deeper into the tunnel system. Each step brought them closer to Devil's Canyon and the answers she desperately needed. Each step brought them closer to Emma. The hairbrush seemed to grow heavier against her chest, a reminder of everything she'd lost and everything she still had to fight for. The Zephyrians had made this personal when they attacked the research station. Now, Sarah Chan was going to show them exactly what human ferocity looked like when it had a target. The war was far from over. Devil's Canyon stretched before them like a wound carved into the planet's surface, its jagged walls rising 300 meters into the alien sky. The old mining operation had been transformed into a fortress of geometric precision that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Zephyrian architecture followed mathematical principles that seemed to bend light and shadow in impossible ways, creating structures that appeared larger on the inside than the outside. Sarah crouched behind a cluster of crystalline formations that had grown from the planet's mineral-rich soil, her tactical scope focused on the prison facility below. Through the scope's enhanced vision, she could see human figures moving in carefully ordered lines between prefabricated detention blocks. Even at this distance, she recognized the distinctive orange jumpsuits that marked civilian prisoners. "Count looks like 300 humans, maybe more," reported Corporal Jackson, the squad's reconnaissance specialist. Her cybernetic eye whirred softly as it adjusted focus. Zephyrian Guard Force appears to be standard occupation strength. 40 soldiers, 6 patrol craft, and 1 command vessel. Torres crawled up beside Sarah, his sniper rifle already assembled. "Captain, I can take out their communications array from here. Single shot, clean, and quiet." Sarah studied the facility's layout through her scope. The Zephyrians had built their prison with typical efficiency. Central command hub, radial detention blocks, and a processing center where prisoners were sorted for different work assignments. Her sister could be in any of those buildings, or worse, already transferred to one of the labor camps in the Northern Territories. Negative on the communications array, Sarah decided. "We need intelligence before we start shooting." "Morrison, what's your assessment of their defensive positions?" The demolitions expert consulted his tablet, which displayed a detailed scan of the facility's energy signatures. "Their shield generators are centralized in the command hub. Take those down, and the whole facility becomes vulnerable. But they've got automated defense turrets positioned at every approach vector." Sarah felt the hairbrush pressing against her chest and forced herself to think tactically rather than emotionally. A frontal assault would get her entire squad killed and accomplish nothing. But there had to be a way inside. The Zephyrians were methodical, but their reliance on technological superiority made them predictable. "Kowalski, anything on their communication frequencies?" The young specialist adjusted his equipment, his face scrunched in concentration. "I'm picking up routine patrol chatter in their standard tactical language." "Wait." He held up a hand, pressing his earpiece deeper. "There's something else. A repeating transmission on a human frequency, very weak signal." Sarah's heart rate spiked. "Can you isolate it?" "Working on it." Kowalski's fingers danced across his control interface. "It's heavily encrypted, but the pattern suggests it's a distress beacon. Someone's broadcasting from inside the facility." The possibility that Emma was trying to contact rescue teams sent adrenaline surging through Sarah's system. Her sister had always been the smart one, the scientist who could jury-rig solutions from spare parts and determination. If anyone could find a way to send a signal from inside a Zephyrian prison, it would be Emma. "Can you determine the signal's origin point?" Sarah asked. "Give me 10 minutes," Kowalski replied, already deep in his electronic warfare procedures. While her communications specialist worked, Sarah studied the prison facility with new intensity. The Zephyrians had made one critical error in their design. They'd built their facility around the existing human mining infrastructure. The old excavation tunnels and maintenance shafts still honeycombed the canyon walls, hidden beneath layers of alien construction. "Jackson, I need you to map every service tunnel and ventilation shaft in that facility. Use the geological surveys from the original mining operation." The reconnaissance specialist nodded and began cross-referencing her scanning equipment with archived data from the research station's computers. Within minutes, a three-dimensional model of the facility appeared on Sarah's tactical display, showing both the Zephyrian additions and the underlying human construction. "There," Sarah pointed to a maintenance shaft that connected to the original mining complex. "That tunnel runs directly under the detention blocks. If we can reach it without triggering their perimeter sensors, we can infiltrate the facility from below." Torres examined the route. It's a 15-meter drop down that canyon wall, then a 100-meter crawl through solid rock. "Assuming the tunnel hasn't collapsed or been sealed." "We've crawled through worse," Sarah reminded him. "Remember the siege tunnels on Arcturus Prime?" Her squad's expressions grew grim at the memory. The Battle of Arcturus Prime had been humanity's last major victory against the Hectoran Collective, through 3 weeks of tunnel fighting that had cost thousands of lives. Sarah's squad had spent 48 hours crawling through collapsed mining shafts while enemy forces bombarded the surface above them. That battle had also been where Sarah earned her reputation for impossible rescues. When Hector and forces had captured an entire battalion of human marines, command had written them off as acceptable losses. Sarah had disagreed violently with that assessment and led a rescue mission that violated every principle of military strategy. She'd brought back 237 prisoners, including her then commanding officer. The Zephyrians might be technologically superior to the Hectorans, but they shared the same fatal flaw. They couldn't understand human psychology. They assumed that superior firepower and advanced tactics would break human resistance. They'd never encountered someone like Sarah Chun. "Captain," Kowalski interrupted her planning. "I've got the signal isolated. It's definitely coming from a central detention block, and it's cycling through a pattern that matches Earth military emergency protocols." Sarah felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Emma was alive, and she was trying to communicate with the outside world. But the signal also meant that her sister was deep inside the most heavily guarded section of the facility. "What's the message?" Sarah asked. Kowalski worked his decryption algorithms for several more minutes before looking up with excitement. "It's coordinates, specific locations within the facility, and what looks like guard rotation schedules. Someone's providing intelligence for a rescue operation." The implications hit Sarah immediately. Emma wasn't just alive. She was actively working to sabotage the facility from within. Her sister had always been brilliant, but this level of espionage required incredible courage and skill. The Zephyrians would execute any prisoner caught engaging in resistance activities. "Sir," Torres spoke quietly, "if your sister is broadcasting intelligence, it means she's expecting a rescue attempt. She might not know we're here specifically, but she's definitely hoping someone will come." Sarah nodded, her tactical mind racing through possibilities. Emma's intelligence would make the rescue mission exponentially easier, but it also meant her sister was in immediate danger. If the Zephyrians detected the unauthorized transmissions, they would trace them back to their source. "We move now," Sarah decided. "Every minute we wait increases the chance that they'll discover what Emma's doing." She turned to address her entire squad. "Listen carefully. This is a precision extraction, not a battle. Our objective is to reach Emma and extract her along with as many other prisoners as possible. We go in quiet, we complete the mission, and we disappear before they know what hit them." Morrison raised his hand. "What about the other prisoners, Captain? If we extract just your sister, the Zephyrians will take their frustration out on the remaining captives." The question struck Sarah like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on saving Emma that she hadn't fully considered the consequences for everyone else. The Zephyrians had a brutal reputation for collective punishment. If they suspected a rescue operation, they might execute dozens of prisoners in retaliation. "We extract everyone we can," Sarah decided. "Morrison, I want those shield generators down permanently. Jackson, plot escape routes for large groups moving on foot. Torres, you'll provide overwatch and target any Zephyrian forces that try to interfere." Her squad exchanged glances. They were talking about liberating a prison facility that housed hundreds of people while outnumbered 30 to 1. It was the kind of impossible mission that had made Sarah Chun a legend among human military forces. "Captain," Kowalski said hesitantly, "if we're planning a mass extraction, we'll need transportation for hundreds of people. The facility is 50 clicks from the nearest settlement." Sarah smiled grimly. "Then, we'll have to liberate some Zephyrian transport vehicles." The plan was insane, dangerous, and likely to get them all killed. It was also exactly the kind of operation that had won humanity its few victories against technologically superior enemies. While other species relied on overwhelming force or advanced technology, humans specialized in turning hopeless situations into unlikely triumphs. As they prepared to descend into Devil's Canyon, Sarah felt the hairbrush one more time. Emma was down there, broadcasting intelligence and waiting for rescue. The Zephyrians had made this conflict personal when they attacked the research station. Now, they were about to learn what happened when humans fought for something more important than territory or politics. They were about to learn what happened when humans fought for family. The maintenance tunnel reeked of stagnant water and corroded metal, its walls slick with condensation from the planet's humid atmosphere. Sarah led her squad through the narrow passage, following the route Jackson had mapped from the old mining surveys. Behind them, 30 meters of vertical rock face separated them from the surface and any hope of easy retreat. The tunnel had been carved by human miners 15 years earlier, back when Kepler 442b represented hope rather than horror. Now Sarah crawled through darkness toward a confrontation that would either save hundreds of lives or end her military career in spectacular failure. The hairbrush pressed against her chest with each movement, a constant reminder of why she was risking everything. "Contact ahead," whispered Jackson from point position. Her cybernetic eye glowed softly in the tunnel's blackness as she peered around a bend. "Looks like they sealed the original access point with some kind of polymer barrier." Sarah crawled forward to examine the obstacle. The Zephyrians had indeed blocked the tunnel with their standard construction material, a metallic compound that could withstand most conventional explosives. But they'd made a critical error in their application. They'd sealed the tunnel from the outside, assuming no one would approach from the mining complex. "Morrison," Sarah called softly, "can you breach this quietly?" The demolitions expert squeezed past her in the cramped space, running his hands over the barrier's surface. "Polymer composite, maybe 2 inches thick. I can cut through it with a thermal lance, but it'll take 15 minutes and generate a lot of heat signature." "Do it," Sarah ordered. "Jackson, what's our target zone look like?" The reconnaissance specialist consulted her tactical display. "We'll emerge directly under the central detention block, about 10 meters below the main prisoner processing center. According to the structural scans, there's a utility room that should give us access to the facility's internal corridors." As Morrison began his careful work with the thermal cutting tool, Sarah reviewed Emma's intelligence data one more time. Her sister had identified guard positions, patrol schedules, and even the locations of surveillance equipment. The level of detail suggested that Emma had been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. The thought of her sister spending months in captivity, slowly gathering intelligence while pretending to be a broken prisoner, filled Sarah with a rage so pure it made her hands shake. The Zephyrians prided themselves on their logical superiority, their ability to reduce warfare to mathematical equations. They'd never faced an enemy who fought with the calculated fury of a protective sibling. "Breakthrough in 30 seconds, Morrison reported. Sarah activated her comm unit on the squad frequency. "Remember, we're ghosts until we reach the detention cells. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Our primary objective is Emma Chun, but we extract every prisoner we can carry." The thermal lance completed its work with a soft hiss, and Morrison carefully pulled away a section of the polymer barrier. Cool air flowed through the opening, carrying the distinctive ozone scent of Zephyrian technology. They were inside enemy territory now. Jackson slipped through the breach first, her enhanced vision scanning for threats. After 30 seconds of silence, she signaled all clear. Sarah followed, emerging into a utility room lined with alien control panels and environmental systems. The architecture was wrong in that peculiar Zephyrian way, with angles that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. The sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor beyond the utility room. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, feeling her squad do the same. Through a ventilation grate, she could see 2 Zephyrian guards walking their patrol route with mechanical precision. Their energy rifles hummed softly, charged and ready. According to Emma's intelligence, the guards would pass this location every 23 minutes. That gave them a window to reach the detention level, but only if they moved immediately. Sarah waited for the footsteps to fade before opening the utility room door. The corridor beyond was a testament to Zephyrian efficiency. Clean, well-lit, and monitored by floating sensor drones that moved in predictable patterns. Emma's data had included the drones' scanning schedules, gaps in coverage that lasted exactly 47 seconds. "Now," Sarah whispered. Her squad flowed through the corridor like shadows, each Marine moving with the fluid precision that came from years of combat experience. They'd practiced this kind of infiltration hundreds of times during the war against the Hectoran Collective, but never with stakes this personal. The detention-level access point was 30 meters down the main corridor, past 2 security checkpoints and a guard station. Emma's intelligence indicated that the checkpoint sensors could be fooled by moving during shift changes, when guards were distracted by routine administrative tasks. As they approached the first checkpoint, Sarah heard voices speaking in the harsh consonants of Zephyrian tactical language. Through observation window, she could see 4 guards clustered around a monitoring station, their attention focused on what appeared to be a security review. Perfect timing. Jackson moved through the checkpoint like a whisper, followed by Torres and Morrison. Sarah held her breath as each squad member passed through the sensor field, but Emma's intelligence proved accurate. The guards remained focused on their administrative duties, completely unaware that 12 human Marines had just infiltrated their facility. The detention-level entrance required a more direct approach. According to Emma's data, the access door was controlled by biometric scanners that recognized only authorized Zephyrian personnel. But the door also had a manual override system designed for emergency situations. Sarah studied the control panel, its alien symbols glowing with soft blue light. Emma's intelligence package included detailed schematics of Zephyrian security systems, but operating them required careful timing and nerve. "Kowalski," she whispered, "I need you to create a localized communications disruption. Something that looks like equipment malfunction rather than hostile action." The communications specialist nodded and activated a small electromagnetic pulse device. The detention levels monitoring systems flickered and reset, creating exactly the kind of minor technical problem that plagued all complex facilities. During the 30-second reset window, Sarah activated the manual override. The detention level door slid open with a soft pneumatic hiss, revealing a corridor lined with holding cells. And there in the third cell from the left was Emma Chun. Sarah's sister looked thinner than she remembered, her dark hair shorter and streaked with premature gray. But her eyes still held the fierce intelligence that had made her one of humanity's leading xenobiologists. When Emma saw Sarah through the transparent cell barrier, her expression shifted from surprise to grim satisfaction. Emma held up 5 fingers, then pointed down the corridor. 5 guards in the detention area, positioned exactly where her intelligence had predicted. Sarah felt a surge of pride at her sister's competence under impossible circumstances. But pride would have to wait. According to Emma's data, they had less than 10 minutes before the next security sweep. 10 minutes to liberate hundreds of prisoners and escape a heavily fortified facility while outnumbered 30-1. Sarah had faced worse odds before, but never with so much at stake. As she prepared to breach Emma's cell, she felt the hairbrush pressing against her chest one more time. The simple object that had started this rescue mission now seemed like a talisman, a reminder that some things were worth any risk. The Zephyrians were about to learn that they'd made a fundamental error in their assessment of human psychology. They thought superior technology and logical tactics would always triumph over emotional decision-making. They were about to discover what happened when human emotions were channeled into methodical, professional violence. Sarah Chun was about to show them what real ferocity looked like. She keyed her comm unit to the squad frequency. "Execute rescue protocol. Morrison, I want those guards down quietly. Jackson, begin prisoner extraction. Torres, secure our exit route." As her squad moved into action with deadly precision, Sarah approached her sister's cell. Emma was already standing at the barrier, holding a small device that she'd jury-rigged from prison electronics. A device that could override Zephyrian cell locks from the inside. "I knew you'd come," Emma whispered through the barrier. "I've been preparing for this for 2 months." Sarah smiled grimly as Emma activated her improvised unlock device. The cell barrier deactivated with a soft chime, and sisters who had been separated by war and alien invasion were finally reunited. But the reunion would have to be brief. They still had to escape with 300 prisoners while avoiding 40 Zephyrian guards and 6 patrol craft. The hardest part of the mission was just beginning. Emma stepped out of her cell and immediately handed Sarah a data pad covered in handwritten notes and crude diagrams. Guard rotations, weapon placements, and structural weaknesses, she whispered urgently. I've been mapping this facility since day one. The Zephyrians are predictable once you understand their patterns. Sarah scanned the information quickly, her tactical mind processing Emma's intelligence. Her sister had done more than survive captivity. She turned herself into a one-woman intelligence operation. The level of detail was extraordinary. Guard psychology profiles, equipment maintenance schedules, even dietary preferences that affected alertness levels. There's more, Emma continued, leading Sarah toward a concealed panel in the corridor wall. I've been organizing the other prisoners. We have doctors, engineers, and 3 former military officers. They're ready to move on your signal. The hidden panel opened to reveal a cache of improvised weapons and equipment that the prisoners had been secretly manufacturing. Sharpened metal fragments, jury-rigged communication devices, and even what appeared to be a crude but functional explosive device made from prison cleaning supplies. Jesus, Emma Sara, Briatid. You've been running a resistance cell. The Zephyrians think humans are predictable because we're emotional, Emma replied with a grim smile. They never considered that emotions could fuel systematic planning instead of chaotic behavior. Down the corridor, Morrison and Jackson had moved through the detention cells with surgical precision. 5 Zephyrian guards lay unconscious, their weapons confiscated and their communication equipment disabled. The operation had been so quiet that the facility's automated systems hadn't even registered a security breach. But Sarah knew their luck wouldn't hold much longer. The guards would be missed during the next check-in, and once the alarm was raised, they'd be facing the full strength of the occupation force. How many prisoners can we realistically extract? Sarah asked Emma. All of them, Emma replied without hesitation. I've been planning this evacuation for weeks. We have routes, rally points, and even transportation arranged. Emma led Sarah to a wall display that showed the facility's layout from a prisoner's perspective. She'd identified not just security weaknesses, but also psychological factors, which guards were more likely to panic under pressure, which automated systems could be overloaded by coordinated prisoner actions, and which routes would minimize civilian casualties. The Zephyrians built this facility around their own tactical preferences, Emma explained. Centralized control, predictable responses, and overwhelming technological superiority. But they never adapted their security to account for human ingenuity. Sarah felt a surge of professional admiration for her sister's work. Emma had transformed herself from a captured scientist into a strategic planner whose intelligence rivaled anything produced by Earth Military Command. But admiration would have to wait. They had less than 5 minutes before the security sweep. Kowalski, Sarah called softly. What's the status on facility communications? Still disrupted, but they'll notice the pattern soon. I can give you maybe 3 more minutes of communications blackout before they switch to backup systems. 3 minutes to liberate 300 prisoners and escape a fortified facility. The timeline was impossible by conventional standards, but Sarah had learned during the war that conventional standards didn't apply when human survival was at stake. Emma, execute your evacuation plan. Morrison, I want you to rig every power junction in this facility to overload simultaneously. Jackson, coordinate with Emma on prisoner movement. Torres, prepare overwatch positions for covering fire. Emma activated a hidden communication system she'd built from scavenged electronics. Within seconds, prisoners throughout the facility began moving with coordinated purpose. They didn't run or panic. They moved with the disciplined efficiency of people who had been preparing for this moment for months. Sarah watched in amazement as Emma's resistance network came alive. Prisoners who had seemed broken and defeated suddenly revealed themselves as organized cells of potential soldiers. Former Earth military personnel took command positions. Civilian engineers began sabotaging Zephyrian equipment, and medical personnel organized triage stations for wounded evacuees. "Your sister's been busy," Torres observed, watching prisoners flow through the corridors with military precision. "This isn't a rescue anymore. It's a coordinated breakout operation." Emma had anticipated that observation. "Captain, I need you to understand something. These prisoners aren't just victims waiting for rescue. They're human beings who've been planning their own liberation. Your squad provided the catalyst, but this operation belongs to all of us." The distinction was important in ways that went beyond military tactics. The Zephyrian occupation had been designed to break human spirit through systematic demoralization. By organizing active resistance, Emma had transformed captivity into preparation for counterattack. Morrison's voice crackled over the comm system. "Charges are set. When I trigger these, the entire facility will lose primary power for approximately 10 minutes. "Do it," Sarah ordered. The facility plunged into darkness as every major system overloaded simultaneously. Emergency lighting flickered to life, casting eerie shadows across corridors that were suddenly filled with moving figures. But instead of chaos, the prisoners moved with practiced coordination toward predetermined extraction points. Emma had planned for this moment down to the smallest detail. Evacuation teams led groups of prisoners through routes that avoided security checkpoints. Medical teams carried injured prisoners who couldn't move under their own power. Even children moved with quiet discipline that spoke to months of careful preparation. The first sign of Zephyrian response came 3 minutes into the evacuation. Alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the facility, and Sarah could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons powering up. But Emma's intelligence had anticipated this too. "They'll seal the main exits first," Emma explained as they moved through a maintenance corridor. "But I've identified 17 alternate routes that connect to the old mining tunnels. We'll extract through the canyon walls directly." Sarah realized that her sister had essentially planned a three-dimensional evacuation that used the facility's own infrastructure against its defenders. The Zephyrians had built their prison around human mining tunnels without fully mapping the underlying structure. Emma had spent months exploring every passage and shaft. The sound of weapons fire echoed from the facility's upper levels as Zephyrian guards attempted to regain control. But they were fighting shadows, trying to contain an evacuation that had been rehearsed dozens of times by people who knew the facility better than its builders. "Captain," Jackson's voice crackled over the comm. "I've got visual on prisoner groups reaching the canyon walls. Emma's people are using climbing equipment they manufactured from prison materials." Sarah felt a moment of pure pride watching her sister coordinate the impossible. Emma had taken the worst disaster of her life and transformed it into an opportunity to save hundreds of people. She turned captivity into preparation, despair into determination. But the hardest part was still ahead. Getting the prisoners out of the facility was only the beginning. They still had to transport 300 people across 50 kilometers of hostile territory while avoiding Zephyrian patrol craft and orbital surveillance. "Emma," Sarah said as they reached one of the facility's external access points, "what's your plan for getting everyone to safety?" Emma smiled grimly and pointed toward the canyon walls, where groups of prisoners were already rappelling down, climbing ropes made from braided prison uniforms. "We're not running away, Sarah. We're taking the fight to them." At the canyon floor, Sarah could see vehicles that she hadn't noticed during their initial reconnaissance. Zephyrian transport craft, obviously captured and modified by Emma's resistance network. The prisoners hadn't just been planning an escape. They'd been preparing for a guerrilla campaign. The Zephyrians were about to learn that they'd made a fundamental error in their understanding of human psychology. They'd assumed that imprisonment would break human spirit. Instead, it had given hundreds of humans time to plan, organize, and prepare for the kind of asymmetric warfare that had made humanity legendary throughout the galaxy. Sarah gripped the hairbrush one more time as she prepared to descend into the canyon. What had started as a desperate rescue mission had become something much larger, the beginning of a human resistance that would spread across every occupied world in Zephyrian space. 6 months later, Admiral Carthex of the Zephyrian Third Fleet stood in his command center aboard the dreadnought Inevitable Conquest, staring at tactical displays that made no logical sense. 17 prison facilities across 12 worlds had been liberated in coordinated attacks that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The humans were fighting like animals, using improvised weapons and suicide tactics that belonged to primitive species, not starfaring civilizations. Report, Carthex commanded, his translated voice echoing through the sterile command chamber. Commander Veltak consulted her tactical readouts with obvious distress. The latest incident occurred on Kepler 442b, Admiral. A force of 12 human soldiers somehow liberated 300 prisoners from our most secure detention facility. But that's not the disturbing part. Carthex waited for her to continue, his patience strained by months of inexplicable human behavior. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 star systems through superior tactics and overwhelming technological advantage. Every species they'd encountered had eventually submitted to logical analysis of their strategic position. Humans refused to acknowledge that they were beaten. The prisoners didn't flee to safe territory, Veltak continued. They've established insurgent cells that are actively attacking our supply lines. 3 transport convoys have been destroyed this week alone, using tactics that our strategic computers can't predict. Carthex studied the tactical display, showing Zephyrian positions throughout human space. Red indicators marked successful attacks against occupation forces. The pattern was spreading like a disease, inspiring resistance movements on worlds that have been pacified for months. How many humans are involved in these insurgent activities? He asked. Initial estimates suggested a few hundred scattered survivors, Veltak replied. Current intelligence indicates coordinated resistance networks involving thousands of fighters across multiple star systems. They're sharing information and resources in ways that shouldn't be possible given our communication interdiction. The Admiral felt something approaching concern, an emotion that violated Zephyrian cultural conditioning. The Empire had based its conquest strategy on mathematical analysis of target species' psychological profiles. Humans scored highly for emotional volatility and poorly for strategic patience. They should have collapsed into infighting and despair within months of occupation. Instead, they'd somehow transformed emotional volatility into tactical unpredictability and channeled their grief into systematic violence that was proving remarkably effective against Zephyrian forces trained for conventional warfare. Show me the tactical analysis of the Kepler 442b incident, Carthex ordered. The holographic display shifted to show the prison facility at Devil's Canyon. Veltak highlighted the sequence of events that had led to the mass prisoner liberation, but the analysis raised more questions than it answered. The operation began with a single squad of human Marines who infiltrated the facility through mining tunnels that predated our construction, she explained. But the evacuation itself was coordinated by the prisoners, who had been organizing resistance activities for months while maintaining the appearance of broken compliance. Carthex examined the intelligence reports with growing unease. The human prisoners had manufactured weapons from cleaning supplies, built communication networks from electronic waste, and planned evacuation routes that utilized structural weaknesses in Zephyrian construction techniques, all while appearing to be demoralized captives who posed no security threat. The leader of the prison resistance was a human scientist named Emma Chun, Veltak continued. She organized resistance cells, gathered intelligence on our security procedures, and coordinated with external rescue forces. Our psychological profiles indicated she should have been psychologically broken within weeks of captivity. The name sparked recognition in Carthex's memory. Emma Chun had been captured during the initial assault on the Kepler 442b research station. Intelligence reports had classified her as a low-priority prisoner with no military significance. That assessment had proven catastrophically wrong. "Where is Emma Chun now?" Carthex asked. "Unknown, Admiral." After the prison liberation, she disappeared into the resistance networks that are operating throughout the occupied territories. Intelligence suggests she may be coordinating insurgent activities on multiple worlds. The tactical implications were staggering. If humans could organize effective resistance networks while under maximum security detention, then no Zephyrian facility was truly secure. Worse, the psychological profiles that had guided conquest strategy were fundamentally flawed. "Admiral," another aide approached with urgent data. "We're receiving reports from Fleet Command about similar incidents across the occupation zones. The humans are calling it Liberation Day and celebrating it as a symbol of their resistance movement." Carthex felt his strategic certainty crumbling. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered dozens of species by exploiting their psychological weaknesses and forcing them to accept logical reality. But humans seemed to thrive on impossible odds and emotional motivation that defied mathematical analysis. The prison break at Devil's Canyon had become a symbol that inspired resistance movements across human space. Stories of Emma Chin's resistance network were spreading through underground communication channels, proving to other captured humans that organized resistance was possible even under maximum security conditions. "What are the fleet commanders recommending?" Carthex asked. Veltak consulted her communications array. "Admiral Kethmore suggests increasing security measures and implementing collective punishment protocols to discourage resistance activities. Admiral Zartek recommends withdrawing to defensive positions and reassessing our occupation strategy." Both recommendations acknowledged what Carthex was reluctant to admit. The human occupation was failing despite overwhelming Zephyrian military superiority. The Empire had conquered human space through conventional tactics, but humans were fighting back with methods that fell outside established parameters for civilized warfare. "Admiral," a communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission on standard diplomatic frequencies. It appears to be from the human resistance leadership." Carthex authorized the transmission display, expecting desperate negotiations for prisoner exchanges or territorial concessions. Instead, he found himself looking at two human females in military uniforms, standing in what appeared to be a command center filled with sophisticated equipment. "I am Captain Sarah Chun of the Human Liberation Forces," the older woman announced. "This is my sister, Emma Chun, Chief of Intelligence Operations. We wanted to thank you for providing us with such excellent training facilities." The younger woman, Emma Chun, stepped forward with a smile that contained no warmth whatsoever. "Your prison facilities taught us valuable lessons about Zephyrian psychology and tactical limitations. We've applied those lessons to develop new strategies for asymmetric warfare that your strategic computers apparently can't counter." Sarah Chun continued the message. "We're broadcasting this transmission to every human world under Zephyrian occupation. Today marks the beginning of a coordinated resistance campaign that will demonstrate what happens when humans fight for something more important than territory or politics." Emma Chun held up a simple pink hairbrush, the same object that had started Sarah's desperate rescue mission. "You thought this was just a piece of plastic. You were wrong. This represents everything you failed to understand about human psychology. We don't fight because it's illogical. We fight because some things are more important than logic." The transmission ended with coordinates for 17 Zephyrian installations across multiple star systems, all scheduled for simultaneous attack within the next 72 hours. It was a declaration of war issued by prisoners who had supposedly been broken by months of captivity. Carthex stared at the tactical displays as alarm indicators began flashing throughout Zephyrian-occupied space. Every installation mentioned in the human transmission was reporting signs of coordinated resistance activity. The liberation of Devil's Canyon hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been the opening move in a campaign that threatened the entire occupation. Admiral Veltak spoke quietly. Our psychological profiles may have contained a fundamental error. We assumed that emotional species would be weakened by adversity. The humans appeared to be strengthened by it. Carthex nodded slowly, finally, understanding the magnitude of their strategic miscalculation. The Zephyrian Empire had viewed human emotions as a weakness to be exploited. In reality, those emotions were a source of strength that enabled humans to endure impossible hardships and transform defeat into preparation for counterattack. Throughout human space, resistance cells were emerging from hiding with equipment and training that suggested months of careful preparation. The humans had used Zephyrian captivity as an opportunity to study their enemies, plan coordinated operations, and forge the kind of unbreakable determination that came from fighting for family, freedom, and the simple right to exist. The hairbrush had been more than a symbol. It had been a catalyst that transformed personal desperation into systematic resistance. Emma Chin's intelligence networks had spread across multiple worlds, sharing information and coordinating attacks that would soon challenge the Zephyrian Empire's entire occupation strategy. Admiral Carthex realized that his species had made the same error that had destroyed so many galactic powers throughout history. They had underestimated human ferocity when it had a purpose worth fighting for. The liberation of Devil's Canyon was spreading like wildfire across human space, proving to every prisoner and refugee that resistance was not only possible, but inevitable. The humans were no longer fighting to win. They were fighting to make conquest so costly that even the mighty Zephyrian Empire would eventually decide that some species were too dangerous to cage. And somewhere in the growing network of human resistance, two sisters who had found each other against impossible odds were planning the next phase of a war that would determine whether humanity would kneel or stand. The galaxy was about to learn what human ferocity looked like when it had a target worthy of its fury.